Well, hello everyone. Hi, Braden. How are you doing, my friend?
Chris, I am doing wonderful. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good. This is Thinking About Magic number 4, and if anyone's out there, we appreciate you guys tuning in, and it's going to be a good episode tonight. We got some wonderful guests, and I'll hand it off to you, my friend. What do you got for us?
Thank you, Chris. Well, tonight we have a very important topic and one that's not often considered. In fact, if I try to research this topic, it's really hard to find any great information. And that topic is our responsibility as magicians to our audiences. We're going to talk about the various responsibilities that we might have and some of the responsibilities that we might not have to our audiences. And so I'm so excited today to bring to you two very special guests that I'll introduce in just a moment. But first, it's all about you. You are our fifth panelist. Wherever you're tuning in from on this live stream, I want you to know that your thoughts matter. So put in your thoughts to the same questions. Be part of the panel because you are the fifth panelist. And wherever you're tuning in from, whether it's on Facebook Live or it's on YouTube Live, put in the chat right now where you're tuning in from and what's going on in your magical world. We want to hear from you. From time to time, we'll cut to you throughout the show. So be ready with your wisdom. All right. So I see Alex has said, Let's go. So let's go. Let me introduce you, the guest panelist for this evening. First up is Napoleon Ryan. Napoleon is an actor and a magician from London. Napoleon moved to North America in 2010 and is now based in Los Angeles. Everyone, please welcome Napoleon.
Napoleon.
Hi, guys. Hello.
Hey, Napoleon. Thank you for being here. Our next panelist is Santiago. For the past 30 years, Santiago has studied the art and the history of magic. He has been a magician member of the Magic Castle and part of the inner circle of bizarre magicians and is now an instructor for the world-famous McBride Magic and Mystery School based out of Las Vegas, Nevada. He is also a director and producer for a community theater troupe that focuses on medieval and Renaissance productions specializing in Commedia dell'Arte. Please welcome our good friend, Santiago.
Santiago, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Santiago, welcome to the show. We're going to talk about the magician's responsibility to the audience. So as you watch this show, you think about what do you think the magician's responsibility is to the audience? And we'll start with that very question. Santiago, what is the magician's responsibility to their audiences?
So when we started thinking about this question a while back, it opened up. I spent a bunch of time thinking about it from the last time that we talked and till now. And the thing that I keep coming to over and over again is the responsibility that we accept. So I accept, there are certain things that are automatic. We accept the responsibility that we are going to entertain our audience. We accept the responsibility that the type of show they expect to see is the one they're going to get. If I'm putting on a spooky show, then they should get a spooky experience. If I'm putting on a family-friendly show, they should get a family-friendly experience. Those things are pretty obvious. The thing that becomes less obvious is what are the responsibilities I have to take on that support those goals. So in the case, for example, of a family-friendly audience, one of those responsibilities that I'm taking on is to make sure that I don't do anything that hurts anybody's feelings or steps on any toes or pokes fun at anybody in the audience. The only person I ever poke fun at, if I poke fun at anybody, is myself, because that's an acceptable target. After that, the levels of responsibility that we talk about will become specific depending on different conditions. As I'm sure we all understand, the answer to this question ultimately is going to be, it depends. But there's a lot of things that we can think about that flow into that conversation, which is why I'm glad we're having it.
So would you say, Santiago, that a part of the magician's responsibility, if they choose to accept it, is to, in some ways, take care of the audience?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I might do a spooky show, but at the end of my spooky show, I still am going to make sure that everyone leaves in good condition. Like, I'm not going to do something that hopefully haven't done anything that has triggered somebody. And if I have triggered somebody, I hope that whatever I do at the end of my show allows them to calm down and recenter and be well again. So yes, I absolutely think that I have a responsibility for the condition, the well-being of the audience members as best as I am able to do it.
All right. Well, we're going to turn the lens to Napoleon. Napoleon, what do you say about this topic? What is the magician's responsibility to their audience?
Yeah, I think the responsibility, I suppose, really is. I mean, I suppose if I would encapsulate it in one word, it's preparation. I would say overall, it's like, that can be knowing what audience you're going to perform for, knowing what kind of show you're going to perform for them, knowing that you've got good routines, you've got a script, you have an overall narrative. Maybe during the show, your performing persona has an arc where, they triumph over their obstacles that they face. Or maybe you're the kind of magician whose character during the show shifts the perception of the audience in some way. Or maybe, your persona is somebody who's shown to be not as competent as they thought they were, if it's, say, a comedy magic narrative, perhaps. But yeah, I'd say preparation is the main thing. And I think the other responsibility perhaps is to meet the audience where they are. That doesn't mean you have to leave them where they are, but I think meet them where they are and consider their needs in how you perform to them. So it's not really about us as performers. Obviously, we're facilitating the experience they're about to have. But I think we're kind of, I think the more that we focus on what we can give to them or help them or how we can help them achieve what they think they're going to experience, the more, hopefully, the more successfully we will fulfill that for them.
So what are some questions, Napoleon, and Chris, you as well, you can get in on this as well as Santiago. What are some questions that you might ask as you're trying to prepare for a given show? What are some things that what are some questions that make you feel comfortable that you're taking responsibility for the show?
If I may, Braden, if I may, I just want to key in on what Napoleon said. Preparation, and that's how I kind of looked at this question: what responsibilities do I, as a magician, have? And for me, right from the get-go, practice, rehearse, and perform at your best. And those were the three things that I really key on as my responsibility. So the responsibility goes way before when you hit that stage. And that's what I wanted to add to that. So thank you, Napoleon, for reminding me of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Chris, and following that trend, is there anything that you ask or what do you typically ask a client or someone who's booking you for your performance?
For myself personally, I always tell people, are there any kids in the audience? Because I clearly want to know my audience before I even go onto that stage, if we even have that luxury to know, because sometimes they say they don't know. So that's the first thing. So I know what material to bring to the audience, and also the type of material or the theme. So my act is very specific. It's whimsical, it's pantomime, and very visual and whatnot, but it does have content in there. It can get a little dark, or it can stay along the lines of just being whimsical and happy. So understanding my audience, I will ask what type of audience it is, the age group, the environment. These things help me decide what I'm going to bring on that stage.
Wonderful. And Santiago, what's maybe some questions, or how do you approach your preparing for your performances?
I try very hard to customize things as much as I can for any given audience. So I will spend an awful lot of time with the organizers in either phone calls or email chains or text messages, whatever it takes, getting together with them for coffee if I have to, that kind of thing, to be able to sit down and get a full idea of all of their expectation. Because even if I ask all the questions that I normally ask, how many people are going to be there? What are the age ranges? Is anybody having a birthday or a celebration? Are they, all of those things? There's going to almost inevitably still be something that I need to know that my questions won't cover, which means there's always one question I do ask, which is, what do I need to know that I don't already know at this point? What do you want me to know specifically? Because you have to ask that question. If you don't, as an example, many years ago, I had an opportunity to do a show for a release party at Pixar, and it was fun. I walked away actually with a drawing from one of their artists of me performing magic, so it was really cool. But the organizer of the event did not want me to perform a particular magic trick, and it was just because, we've seen that so many times, we just don't want to see it again. So that factored into my show planning. I wouldn't have known that without asking, right? It was basically straight up, what do I need to know that I haven't covered yet? Oh, well, do you do this particular trick? As a matter of fact, I do. Well, we don't want to see that one. Oh, okay. So I try very hard to try and gather as much about their expectation as much as possible, because that's a responsibility, and I take it as such. I want to give them the show they want to see, as well as slipping in the things that I want to do to surprise them.
Wonderful. And, you have to get used to asking that question, because you've probably had the experience where you've shown up and that has oh, he brought the lemon. He brought the lemons. What's going to happen here, everybody in California? So that's a great point. And Chris, I think we've got some folks who have jumped in here.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to tune in on the comment section, our fifth panelist. So I know this guy right here. His name's Will Roberts, actually a performer, used to perform for Cirque du Soleil. And one of my good friends, Will Roberts, says, I think he was answering the question of responsibility of the magician, and he says engage. And I completely agree with Will there. And also Sandra says obligation versus responsibility. And I think she's keying in on the difference between the two, and what a magician has, either obligation or responsibility. And so thank you, Sandra, for that.
Yeah, Sandra, you brought up a great point that we'll now ask the group. What's the difference in magic where it's a magician's obligation versus a magician's responsibility? Is there a difference? Are we just talking semantics, or is there a difference between responsibility and obligation, Napoleon?
Well, I would just say your obligation is to do magic if you're turning up to do a magic show, but your responsibility is to be good, hopefully, and connect with the audience and all the stuff that you would ideally want if you're going to do a good show.
Well said. Well said. Santiago, how about you?
Well, as it turns out, I happen to know Sandra. She's a very good friend of mine, and I got an idea that I know the way she's thinking here, that obligation is the things that you are just flat out required to do. So as Napoleon says, you're going to do the show that you are supposed to be doing. but responsibility are the choices that we decide to hold ourselves to on top of that. So that I'm guessing that's where she's coming from with regards to that, just knowing, because these are the kinds of conversations I've had with her over the years as well. So that's my take on that is, yes, as a magician, I am obligated to do magic and to do good magic, and responsibility is certainly, yes, I am responsible to do the best show that I can possibly do, because that's my personal requirement. You know, I don't know that there are magicians who don't have that same requirement, but if there are, I'm sorry. But, you know, we all should be wanting to do the best show that we can possibly do. The question then becomes, are there additional responsibilities beyond that we want to start adding on top of it? So, yeah, I think that's where she's coming from.
Well, go ahead, Napoleon. Yes.
I was just going to sort of do a little segue also from your earlier comments, Tim, about finding out that that particular client didn't want to see a particular trick. And it was very, you know, recently there's been a lot of discussion again about Joshua Jay's video and the research that he did on how a lay audience reacts to magic and what they like, what they dislike. And I too am similar with you. I try and customize the show. And one of the things that I may not necessarily ask the client, but one of the things that I do as a responsibility to hopefully giving the audience a fresh experience each time I see them, particularly if I'm seeing a repeat audience, maybe it's the same group of kids, for example, or it's the same group of adults. I try to give them things that they haven't necessarily seen before, or at least that I haven't done for them before, as much as possible. You know, so as part of my responsibility to myself to do a good show, I try and, you know, have a set list. And obviously sometimes you do an event and you don't always do everything you intend on your set list for whatever reason. But after the event, I try and then write up, I have my plan, and then I do my sort of report of what I actually did. And then obviously, you know, a year later or 3 months later, or whenever you see that same group of people again, and maybe you find out that somebody there saw you before, you can then cross-reference that and then hopefully do slightly different repertoire or a lot of different repertoire. But sorry, that joins in with Joshua Jay's recent video that's come back again about how, you know, the audience don't like seeing the same things. And I was wondering if it was the linking rings was the one that they particularly didn't want to see.
As a matter of fact, yes. As a matter of fact, that was exactly it, yes.
I'm a mind reader as well. But, yeah, it's funny. I've heard that my wife is not a magician. Oh, she is a magician actually now. But again, it's that thing when you're in close proximity to someone who isn't somebody who's done magic for years. It's very interesting when they have a different reaction to watching technical things than we do, and seeing things that they may have seen again and again because they happen to have been with you as a magician.
Yeah.
Indeed. And, you know, so when I talk with Napoleon, one of the things that strikes me about him in particular, about you, Napoleon, is that you will, like, right up until the last moment, maybe even during the show, you'll call audibles, and you kind of orchestrate, and you're watching things, and you're very attuned to those hours. If you have hours, in some cases there isn't enough time to have the hours, but whatever time you do have, you're very attuned to, like, you're watching body language of the audience to see if this, you know, is this based on your experience, is this the type of crowd that's going to go for this type of stuff, or is this the type of crowd that's going to go for that type of stuff? And a lot of times you make changes based on that. Napoleon, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I did a show today for a nursing home, and I actually only had 2.5 hours sleep because, you know, it's not my normal audience that I perform for. And so again, I felt, you know, I just felt like I you know, it's probably not the best way of doing it, but I felt like, you know, I need to absorb as much as possible so I can be as in as good a position as possible to respond to the audience that I have. Now, I think they told me that the audience would be mainly seniors, and, you know, they could ambulate, which, I mean, I think they can get around. But obviously when I turned up, they weren't quite as mobile or perhaps as interactive as they'd let me know. So the great thing was I had stuff that I could do, but again, it's like that whole thing of like, you know, you don't know until you get there. And I mean, I think that's kind of a special case, perhaps a residential facility, a care facility. But I mean, it's the same with, you know, doing a birthday party. You could turn up to a 5-year-old's birthday party, assuming perhaps that all the children there will be 5, 6, 4, 5, you know, maybe some siblings who are younger. But you could turn up to a show and quite easily find that you're the only, well, there's a 5-year-old and then everyone else is an adult, or everyone else is the 13-year-old boy, or, you know, so your show has to really adjust quite heavily. And yeah, so and again, you know, even if you are performing for what might be a typical audience of, say, 5-year-olds, you know, there are different communities, particularly in Los Angeles, and, you know, one community might be very vocal in how they react to the show, and another community might be much more muted. They're still enjoying the show, hopefully, but they're much less, they're less effusive, they're less vocal. You know, it's very interesting. So obviously your persona might have to change. If they're shyer, then you might want to tone it down. If they're more boisterous, or you have to top them, then you have to come up a little bit in your dynamism. Yeah, it's all, I mean, again, it's like something that it's just something that you learn a little bit. I mean, I don't always get it right. You know, sometimes I make the wrong judgment call in the moment, but it's one of those things. It's like, it's almost like sixth sense. You just, the more you do it, you get more of a sense of what might play well, what jokes might land better, what is good taste for that audience, what is bad taste for that audience.
And with that, we are going to do a lightning round here. We're going to do a lightning round. And if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and put your answers to these questions into the comments section, and we'll bring them up on screen here. So the first question we have is the responsibility of a magician to debunk things? Who wants to take a stab at that one?
I will, because this is a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart. My answer is yes. There is, of course, always going to be a caveat here, but the caveat is that I'm not trying to destroy somebody's enjoyment of a magic trick. But when I see somebody who is clearly using a magic trick to present themselves as something more, and we know that happens, that there's charlatanism and so on and so forth takes place. Yeah. You know, I've been in situations personally where I wasn't trying to convince anyone that I had supernatural powers or anything, and yet I still walk away with people coming up to me going, "Hey, did you like do something mystical with that?" Because like I'll do fortune telling and things like that sometimes as part of my shows. So in cases like that, I'm basically going to say, no, what I did was a trick, or what I did is a skill, and it's a thing that anybody can learn to do, and so on. But yeah, I mean, without trying to trample over something, I do believe that I have a responsibility to debunk when it is being misused.
And even debunk yourself, as you explain.
Yes.
Fantastic. Napoleon, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the kind of ways that I debunk in a show, if somebody, say you're doing something that might be a sucker trick already, and, you know, people, and so you've led them down a certain conceptual path, and they think the method is a certain way, and they, you know, you get people shouting out, "Oh, you know, you've got a second Rubik's Cube in the bag," or, you know, "It's behind your back," or whatever it might be. I mean, I think that's the perfect opportunity for a magician to debunk what they think the method is, and that obviously adds to the entertainment value and hopefully to the magic. You're disproving their logic or whatever they think is the method. And I think the second instance of debunking is also when you sort of I heard, I think it was Dunninger, he used to go on stage and he'd say, "You know, I'm not one of these fake fraudulent mediums. I don't use those fake black, you know, those, here's a fake blackboard. Look at this, it's a trick blackboard. You know, see that? I don't use that." And he throws it off stage. And then, of course, pulls out another one, which is, again, similarly gimmicked or slightly differently gimmicked. But again, that's about him sort of setting up his the method that he is going to use. So I think you can obviously debunk as in service of the show.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to do another question here. That's you have some time to answer this, but a lightning round, and this is for the audience as well. Is a magician's responsibility to educate their audience? Do they have a responsibility to educate their audience in any way? Who would like to take that?
If I may, Braden, I'd like to chime in because I love this. I love this question just because, you can educate either through words or through pantomime. And my thing is pantomime, as you guys know. But I think, when I think of educate, I always think just in general terms. My duty as a magician is to maintain the mystery of magic. And that is what I'm trying to do with the audience, is to let them know that magic comes in different forms. And they may have seen it in a certain way for a long time, but at least from my expression of magic, I want to educate the audience. And it's part of my intention as a performer to show them that it can be something completely different than what they had seen prior, hopefully. But that to me is an education for people when they see something truly authentic that is unique to yourself. I think in that sense, you automatically educate someone that magic can be unique, even though it's the same trick over and over and over again. But that's what I wanted to end.
Wow. Thank you so much, Chris, for jumping in on that. That's a fabulous answer. I'm curious as to Santiago and Napoleon on this one as well.
Well, I'm going to say that, define educate, because I totally agree with what you just said, Chris, in terms of, we should be educating our audience to the whole variety of performances that are available. If you say you're a magician and, the first thing that anybody ever asks is, well, you do kid shows? There's a lot of other kinds of magic out there, my friends, so that's certainly one level of education. But I will add to that, and I've always had this philosophy ever since I was a kid. And I came to this idea, like somewhere around 7th or 8th grade, and I've held on to it ever since, which is, if I've got a choice between making someone laugh and making someone think, I'm going to go with making someone think. Because if I do that, they might laugh too, but I will have taught something. And in mystery school, in Jeff's school in Vegas here, we all do sort of take on the role of the sage from time to time, where we get to educate our audiences a little bit on any number of topics where, we can use a magic trick to illustrate a point. And in doing so, we can educate our audience by virtue of magic. As a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to kick off some serious thinking about that particular topic, because I've got some ideas where I want to take it. But yes, I think we do. It's as I mentioned earlier about responsibilities we choose to accept for ourselves. I would call this one of those types of responsibilities.
Fabulous answer. And it looks like Sandra has chimed in with an answer as well. Santiago, so put this up here.
Go see ahead, that.
Chris.
There you go. So Sandra says, educate, but don't bash them over the head. Don't lecture. Put it in a way that they have the epiphany themselves, inspired by you. Wonderful comment by Sandra there.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Napoleon, follow that.
Yeah, I think in a general way, I think we have the responsibility to educate the audience about how to be an audience for magic, or for theatre, or just to be an audience in general. So, the behaviors that perhaps might be acceptable and not acceptable. Sometimes you have an audience that's a bit more rowdy, and you have to let them know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Or you might set ground rules at the beginning of the show. I mean, often in children's magic work, you might set, this is, if I do this, you do this, if you do that, and I think but also in the adult, I saw Jeff at the Magic Castle, Jeff McBride, in the close-up room the first time I actually saw him live, and I was standing because there were no seats left, and the audience was quite rowdy for that particular performance, and he just with his singing bowl, he just calmed them down. It was very masterful. And I also the kind of two little side tables at the Magic Castle, and whoever the couple that had been brought up to be on stage with Jeff sitting either side of him, the man had decided to stick his glass of whatever it was on Jeff's prop box, I think it was, and Jeff very elegantly just put it back where it should have been in the guy's lap. And so but that was done very subtly. But again, it's educating the audience about, you're about to see something. This is my space. You're in my space, and this is how it's going to be. There are certain rules. I'm not necessarily going to tell you what the rules are, but the behavior will hopefully speak for itself. And I think in my shows, I suppose I might educate the audience in a certain way, on a karmic level, in a moral level, in a very subtle way. I do certain number of routines, perhaps in the middle of the show, when I want a different emotional dynamic with the audience. Maybe I'm slightly more antagonistic with the children. I do a few comeuppance routines sometimes. I get a little bit too big for my britches, or maybe I'm a bit antagonistic with the audience as a different dynamic from the beginning of the show, just to give it a nice range and arc. And I obviously come a cropper. I things go wrong for me. They go right for the volunteer on stage. I'm not mean particularly. It'd be funny. But again, like, obviously, if you're watching that as a child, hopefully that's something that they, on some level, absorb implicitly. That if you get a little bit too big for your britches, or if you're a bit too, karma will get you. Whatever you define karma to be, you'll get a comeuppance if pride comes before a fall, all that sort of thing. So, but that's very implicit. I don't go around saying, see, there's a lesson here. I just showed you that if you do this, this will happen. I think they just absorb that. They see the behavior and they realize, I went down a certain path as a character, and it didn't do me any favors.
So we have to educate our audiences. We have to, what a term might be used as condition the audience, but I like better the idea that we're educating the audience on how to act in our shows and what to expect. I have another kind of lightning round question here that we didn't have planned, but what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of the responses we got on our Facebook page. So if you go to @Thinking About Magic Livestream, you can join our conversation there. And one of the questions that we had was, what is the responsibility of the magician? And you answered in various different ways, but there's a theme that kind of came up that we haven't talked about. And so I'd like to talk about this theme. And the theme from folks, and I'll name them off here. Let's see. Brian Hall said that shock and awe is the responsibility of the magician. Okay. Serena Stone, if a group of people who have gathered to perform, you have two responsibilities: show up and perform. Jonas had said your responsibility is one of fascination and wonder. And Daniel, who is Byron, to make them forget the world on the outside, not remind them of the world on the outside. So as we think about these responses of fascination and wonder, what are your thoughts on this? Is our responsibility to provide wonder? We talked about, to do magic, but what does that mean? How would you define what we're trying to deliver?
Yeah, I would say those things are all connected. Somebody's phone, I think. Sorry. Oh, is it me? Sorry.
This is live, everybody.
I don't know what that is. Sorry, I don't know if it's me. I don't know what it is. But I think all those comments are actually connected. The shock and awe comment, I think Brian said that. He wants something that, is not something that he'd previously experienced. He wants a shock from the continuum of his experience as he goes into the show. Somebody who wants wonder, they want to see something that is not part of their regular, ordinary daily life. So I think really, something that might encapsulate all those different ideas is give them something they can't see at home, or something that they don't get from their ordinary daily experience of the world. I mean, so, because it seems like all those things, like the magician who I can't see the comment, but he basically said he wants to see something that he doesn't know how it's done, because it will annoy him, but also it will perhaps make him more excited to learn what that thing is. Again, that's the thing where he's seeing something he hasn't seen before, and I think that is part of magic's great appeal, is that you can, you're giving the audience an experience of something that they don't think is possible, that they don't recognize in their daily lives, that their previous experience of life hasn't prepared them for. If it's like a dollar bill transforming into a Kinder egg or whatever it might be, it's something they didn't believe was possible. So I think maybe that helps a little bit encapsulate all those different ideas, even though shock and awe is very different from wonder, and is very different from some impossible method that you don't know how it's done for a particular trick.
So Napoleon, it sounds like there's a lot of different things that we could provide. Now we'll go to Chris. We've got some comments out there before we go to Santiago on this.
Yeah, so our first comment, Braden, is Nick Sorensen, our buddy from BuddyCast.
Yes,
podcast.
Nick.
There you go. Hello, Nick, out there. So he's asking, so on the topic of responsibility, what would you say about handling hecklers or people who want to debunk magicians? And I think we kind of went over that on the debunking question. And Nick, I think I speak for most of us here. Yes, it is our responsibility to debunk, at least on certain occasions, people's insinuation on how something works. Alex Bowden here is our next comment. He's watching from his laptop, and I think this is in reference to Napoleon. I checked my phone next to it. It sounded so real on my end, and that is the definition of an illusion. So we are all learning here.
Alex, that means one thing. We'll keep it in the show, okay?
Yeah. But that's all I got, Braden. So back to you, my friend.
Thank you. And I just want to touch on Nick's point, and he's been doing a wonderful job on Dwarfism Awareness Month, and he's done such an amazing work on that. And he was just recognized for, I believe it was Erie, Pennsylvania, had recognized him for all that work, and they made a special recognition for that. So thank you, Nick. And I think that might be a good question we can kind of wrap around in a minute. But Santiago, as far as fascination, wonder, shock, and awe, Napoleon had mentioned a comment that did come into us where it was from Mike Panato, and he said, "Your job is to piss me off. I want to go to a magic show and not know how they do their tricks. And it was so good that I am angry that I don't know how it's done." So your thoughts, Santiago?
This is one of those things where the language itself is telling. I don't want to do something where I'm pissing people off. That's just kind of scary. But if they're going to but what he's talking about is the frustration of seeing something so miraculous in front of him that and in that case, I do want to piss him off then, right? So there's this balance of language going on. My stepfather is kind of similar to this. It's not that he gets pissed per se, but my stepfather is a physicist and a scientist. And so when I do something in front of him and he doesn't get it, he tries very hard to deconstruct absolutely everything. And over the years, I've even, years ago caught him trying to get into my magic bag to see how something worked. So that being said, yes, I think we do have, I agree with what Napoleon was saying. I think we, all of these sorts of ideas kind of fall under a general category of creating that moment where people are just boggled. What the heck just happened in front of me? I want them to have that moment. I really want them to have that moment. And however they respond to it from that point on, that's up to them, whether they're just throw their hands up in the air or like our buddy here, he decides to be pissed, whichever works. The thing that I think about all of this, though, is to me, this is the baseline level of what we as magicians should be striving for anyway. I mean, this is the beginning. After this, then what are we doing on top of it to bring that much more? So, a magician who doesn't fool anybody is no magician, is really what it boils down to. So I expect shock and awe at some point. I expect people to just be, jaws on the ground and eyes bugging out. I want that. I love those moments, especially when I'm doing them close up one-on-one with somebody. I might have 2 or 3 people standing around, and I'll look at the other people and I go, that's the look. That's why I do this. I want those moments to happen for people, because it does, at least for a time, set them free. The worries of the world should be left outside the door to the theater. When they come into the theater, whatever that theater space is, they don't have my job there is to take them away from the things that are out there and give them things to think about here, things to feel here, things that will hopefully inspire and enchant and shock and awe and all of that. I want that to happen for them here, because that renews them. And then when they go back out those theater doors and they're on their way into the rest of their lives, they're taking a little something with them. So one of the things that the magic school is really good about, we try to tell people that there's one message that we want to give over and over and over again, which is, you're magic too. I want them to walk away with that.
If I may, Braden, I'd like to key in on what Santiago just said. It renews the audience. And for me, when I look at magic, I almost look at magic as just, it has an underlying message that there is hope, that miracles can happen. Or magic reminds us that the possibility of something mysterious can happen. And I think that's what I got out of Santiago. And I think it's great that he points out that, sometimes it renews that feeling. And that's what our responsibility is to send that message out.
Yes, and we're going to head towards our final thoughts. So this is, we'll go around the audience here for final thoughts. And you at home, the 5th panelist, we want your final thoughts. Toss them into the comment section. What is your final thoughts for now on this topic? And I will kind of seed the final thoughts, if you will. Feel free, Napoleon and Santiago, to answer this however you'd like on your final thoughts on this topic. But I would also add in, if you could give us an example of an irresponsible magician when you do so, that would be wonderful. We'll go to the powerful questions now. Chris, if you could bring those up on the screen. We just have a few powerful questions for you.
All right, I'm going to bring them up here, and here they are, Braden.
So think about this out there, students of magic. What responsibilities do you accept for your audiences? What role have you decided to play? And what role have you decided not to play? And with that, we'll go to Napoleon for your final thoughts.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I saw a lecture recently by Dwayne Laughlin, which I thought was very good. And he was talking about, what he thinks he should give to an audience. And he was talking about, he wants his show to be a quality show. He's doing magic with class, which means it's skilled magic. It's good magic, whatever that may mean, because obviously people might debate what that is. But, he's technically skilled. It's perhaps not just self-working tricks. He wants a mixture of different things, bit of sleight of hand, props, apparatus, illusions. He wants a mixture of different things. He wants a show where it's about the audience. It's about treating the audience with kindness and respect. He wants it to be rehearsed. And he wants the audience to see a variety of different things. It's not all just card magic, for example. He wants them to see different things, silk magic or magic with sponge balls or whatever it might be, illusions. And again, also unusual things. Again, that idea of giving the audience something that they can't see at home, something that will make them want to come back to the theater to see more magic. Something, it's not just something you can see on TV. Maybe it's not just in a black box kind of theater, because a lot of magic now is fairly minimal. one idea that I thought was very interesting was he was talking about, sometimes audiences don't want to think too much, and because there is such a heavy focus on mentalism at the moment in magic, you're making the audience have to think, and maybe they don't want to. Some audiences do want to think, and they do want to go on that journey, but some audiences don't. They might like to be taken away in some kind of a magical dream of color and visual excitement. They might not necessarily want to remember stuff as much. And again, but I think that's partly looking at your audience and looking at your venue, and hopefully finding commonalities between the two of them. Talking about moving on to irresponsible performers. I mean, some people would say doing fire on stage or a trick for children with fire, obviously that might be quite irresponsible in that particular setting. But obviously in a comedy club setting, if you're the Amazing Jonathan or you're some other kind of maybe like outrageous, more taboo style act, then that's perfectly fine, because you're meeting your actions to the audience that has come to see you, hopefully, and they know what you're going to do. So I think yeah, it's very contextual sometimes, the irresponsibility thing. But I think I wouldn't set loads of things on fire at a church garden party. I don't think that's the appropriate venue for that.
All right, Santiago.
Okay. There is so much to unpack in all of this. I think I think we've pretty well established among us that there is what we could call a baseline responsibility to what magicians should be doing. We should be entertaining. We should be providing the kind of venue and the kind of forewarning based on who we are and the advertising we send out, so that people know what kind of act they're coming to see, where we have a baseline responsibility to be as good as we can possibly be, and to create those moments of wonder that just blow people out of the water. So I think we can accept that just across the board. The idea of additional responsibilities are things like, well, okay, these are the things that I accept upon myself, that I want to be this kind of magician who does these kinds of things. And so then it becomes necessary to educate myself. I want my magic to be, we'll call it socially responsible, for example. I want to be, so if I want to do that, then I have to educate myself enough on the social things that could come up so that I am doing that. That's an additional responsibility I've accepted upon myself. Any additional thing like that, those are the things we set for ourselves. And honestly, those are the ways we raise the bar on ourselves. My magic will become better because I choose to embrace this particular responsibility, whichever one or that one, or whichever ones I decide on, because now I'm going to focus on those things, and that's going to help define me and define my venue and define the audiences I want to appeal to. It raises the bar. So I think those are important sort of things that we can consider. As to irresponsible magic, oh boy, there are so many things that we can point to that have happened that we as magicians make jokes about all the time. Hold up your hand, no, the clean one. Or, all of these other kinds of jokes that we hear, we know these are dated, old, and insulting on some levels. So right off the bat, you're eliminating those things to get out of your act, out of anything that you're doing. There is one, when you first broached this, the first thing that popped into my head, the first was a particular magic effect that I find super irresponsible. And it's, I've seen a couple of big name people do it on television, and I've seen plenty of us down here in the trenches doing it as well. I won't go anywhere near it. It's any of those things that makes that little spider appear, that whole effect that puts... I'm arachnophobic.
Yeah.
So when that thing hit the market, I was like, I'm never even going to go near that sort of thing. And anybody, if somebody ever tried to do that to me, chances are pretty good they'd get slugged. I mean, because my response, it would just be so automatic. So I think there are triggering things that we can say are kind of universal. I don't know anybody. There's very few people who would find the spider on the back of their hand to be anything other than startling and scary. So things like that. Another magician who framed their effect. They were doing something that was kind of an underwater torture cell Houdini style sort of thing, but they framed it in the context of waterboarding when that was a big thing several years ago. And that's irresponsible. I mean, those kinds of messages, sending out those kinds of tricks and those kinds of messages to audiences, I just don't see that being very, very responsible at all. So those are the kinds of things I'd see, like, you got to think, what is the impact of this? What is the worst possible impact of this on an audience member? Do I want to risk that? No, I don't. So yeah, that's where I stand on that.
Fantastic response, Santiago, and I agree with you. And so many of these lines that are thrown into these magic acts are just to justify the laugh tracks that come with them, and they don't think about the real implications of what they're saying. And you can see this on countless pieces of magic that I've watched, and I'm sure many of our viewers have watched on YouTube. It's just to justify a needless laugh track. And you're like, why was that even in there? What does that even mean? That doesn't even make sense. And they knew it wouldn't make sense, so that it could only be for a laugh track. Thank you both, Napoleon and Santiago, for being here tonight. We really appreciate your thoughts on the magician's responsibility to the audience. And I have a few thoughts that I'd like to kind of bring up. One is Alex, and this kind of dovetails off what Santiago and Napoleon was saying. Alex Bowden commented that we need to think about the trust level of the room and realize that everyone does not have the same comfort level with a stranger asking them to do things. And the point that you brought up, Santiago, with the spider is, if it's a close personal friend, that's one thing. But people are doing this stuff to strangers, and there's no rapport built. They're going to try to build rapport off of this type of effect. And so we want to be very careful of that and make sure that everyone enjoys the experience and not at the expense of anyone on stage or off stage during your performances. Because sometimes, as Alex put it, people just want to watch, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. So I think that was really well put by him. Going back to Nick's comment that he had on hecklers and things of that, I will just share some experiences that I've had where when someone, 90% of the time in the performances that I've done, when someone is heckling or saying, how do you do it, or do it again, or just kind of doing that kind of a thing, I perceive it as they are trying to appreciate magic and they don't know how to communicate it. They like it. They want more of it. In the performances that I've had, they just have a hard time vocalizing that in a loving way. So it can kind of come across like you're being heckled. And if you just take a step back and go, well, they just want more magic. They just don't know how to say that they appreciate the magic. And so you can do what you want with that. But I have found that to be the case often. So that's that question. And then on the irresponsible magician side of things, prepared. So if you're unprepared, you're irresponsible, I would say. And also, if I think of a magician who's irresponsible, it would be a drunk magician. It would be someone who just doesn't have any regard for what they're about to do or perform, or any sanctity for the art that they're about to do. And so that can be one version of an irresponsible magician. But if you've got more versions of irresponsible magicians, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'd love to hear these descriptions, these characterizations, because that's what they are. But thank you both for being here. And Chris, any final words from you, sir?
Yeah, you know, I think we basically covered a lot as far as our responsibilities as a magician. But what really intrigues me is the irresponsible part of it all. I think in general, you know, we truly need to uphold what magic should be. It's the best that we can give to prepare, to create wonderful scripts, to create the great slides. I think that's truly what makes us, you know, responsible magicians, to deliver that. And if we don't do it, if we don't prepare, we don't practice, we don't rehearse, and we don't put in the time, to me, that makes us just as irresponsible as someone who's just not not you know, taking on that responsibility or holding the value of magic for what it should be. And that's what I wanted to say. So thank you very much. Thank you, Santiago, Napoleon, for your thoughts tonight. I truly appreciate it, and I learned as well. And thank you, Braden.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Well, we're going to sign off now. You're Chris Herren.
Yes, I am.
And I'm Braden Daniels.
Braden Daniels, and everyone out there, thank you again. Happy Halloween to all of you, and we encourage you all to
keep thinking about magic. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.